Let's talk about the D menu, the top part first, okay? On the left hand side, you got all the types of shapes, so circle, square, or box, endgon, and custom. Now this one is going to tell you what kind of cut you're in, so what kind of boolean mode you're in. So now you're in cut, which is difference, then you got slice, then you got intersect, inset, then you got join, knife, and then extract and make. So by default, you're gonna be in different boolean, which is cut. And this one is a separate menu, Shift V menu. We're gonna talk about it in a different video. And this one is also a separate menu, which is up here as well. It's a settings menu for different, behaviors, input, display, etc. Now, this bar is going to change depending which shape you're in. You see, it's kind of like a contextual menu. So it's going to shift the options depending which shape you have chosen. And you also have some options here in the bottom for each of these cuts, right? So this entire section is devoted to different types of cuts. So let's talk about the circle. Now, here you have a draw origin. So this one is center and this one is corner. So by default, obviously, circle is going to be set to draw origin center. So when you draw a circle, it's going to be drawn from the center where you clicked. Now you can shift it to corner, which in our case is going to be the edge of the circle, but you'll see that we're going to be drawing kind of a yo-yo. Now you can fix this by holding shift to create a perfect circle. And if you want to change it to be drawn from the middle, you just hold Alt as well. So in short, if you want to switch between these two options, you simply hold Alt. Now, box is going to be by default set to corner, which makes sense. But remember, like I told you when we were performing this kind of a circular array operation in one of the previous videos, if you hold Alt, you can shift this to the middle, so to the center again. So basically, hold Alt key when you want to change this or toggle between them. So now this one is going to be constant for all of these, right? And it will tell you where the origin point of the cutter is. Because origin point of the object we're cutting is the middle. But when you cut something, let's say with a box, right? And shift click to convert this cutter to live. So shift and click. You see origin point is going to be in the middle. Now you'll see if you look closely, there is like a dotted line here. And that's a parental line. So every single cutter in Boxcutter, so when you use Boxcutter, it's going to be parented automatically to the mesh you're cutting. So I can move with the cutters, scale it, rotate it, and they're going to move with it, even if you can't see them. Now, if you duplicate this mesh, I know that we're going a bit deep here, but it's actually the best, place to talk about it. If I duplicate this cube, I still have the boolean running on it, the boolean modifier, but since the boolean is here, not on the cube, right? It disappears. So the cutter stays here, but the cube moves. Now you can fix this with hard ops. So watch. Shift D, right? Then right mouse button to cancel. So we have this shape here. Then go to Q menu, go to operations and uniquify. This will actually duplicate the cutters and parent them to the new mesh. So now you're gonna have this. And you can actually go back to hard ops and use F-scroll to recall these cutters. So that's how you duplicate a mesh with cutters and make sure that the cutters remain parented to that mesh. You can move it with the cutters, right? So anyway, let's go back to origin point. So this one is in the middle, right? So now here, if you change this to, for example, corner, right? It's gonna be in a corner when you start drawing. So in our case, it's gonna be, let me just nuke this. In our case, it's going to be here, you see, in a corner, right? And this corner is going to be parented because objects are parented between origin points, right? Then you can switch it to center, which is going to be the center of the top face. So let me just do it again. Here on the top, you see. And the last one is the active element. So it's going to be actually the object you're cutting. So if I'm going to cut this and shift click to live, my origin point for this cutter is actually in the same place as the origin point of the object. So watch, see that? So this could be interesting when you, for instance, want to array stuff, manipulate with them, transform them. This could be interesting. So, you have this option. I never use it, to be honest, but you can if you want to. Then this option here is a draw line, which is also here, like I told you before. This option is kind of redundant now, but I'll show you anyway. And it's redundant because we have this Shift V menu I told you about, right? This one, which is a very robust menu for aligning cuts. The reason why it's called draw line, because you simply draw a line first. So watch, you click and you drag along the edge that you want to align to. Then you release your mouse and you create a shape of the boolean. Then you click, you drag a boolean and you apply. So you can align your shape more or less to, to this edge. And you can see that it's not really super accurate, right? The distance here is a bit different, which is why I don't use it. I prefer to use a Shift V menu and go to nearest edge, for example, and then turn this rubbish off, and I can perfectly align myself to this edge. You see, that's why I'm telling you that I prefer to use this menu, and this one is something I never use, but it's there if you need it. And the Shift V menu, don't worry about it, we'll talk about it later on, but you can see now how powerful this thing is, right? So that's a draw line. And let's go back to the circle, because circle has a few more options here. So the first option by default is gonna be the polygon option. Now, I would suggest you stay in polygon option, because that's the best mode to cut with circle. It's just a regular, it's just a regular cut with a circle. You obviously can hold shift and change the number of verts, right? You can also go here and select a default number of verts, let's say 32 or 6, right? And Boxcutter is going to remember this number. Even if you're going to change it manually, let's say we're going to switch it to, I don't know, let's say 10, right? Next cut's going to be at 10. So it simply remembers the number. By default is 30, okay? Now, next one is going to be modifier. You don't really want to use that. I can show you what it is. When you go here to behavior and enable the keep modifier screw, and you're going to run circle modifier here, and you're going to recover this cutter. If you go to modifiers, you'll see there's going to be a screw modifier. So technically this circle cutter is made out of a screw modifier. It's a very old behavior, and this was discontinued in a way, so it's kind of like a remnant, I don't really use that. Now this one, however, is interesting, the star. So let me show you what it does, and also let me turn off this rubbish here. So now star modifier is kind of cool, because what you can do with it, for example, is you can do stuff like this, right? And then you can scroll down your mouse, and then you can press B for bevel, and then you can change it to a chamfer. So move to the left and to the right, and you can see we're gonna get this kind of a cool cogwheel effect, right? Watch this. Then press T, for example, and space, and boom. And you can create stuff like this, which is really cool. And you can do the same thing with a make boolean. So B for bevel, right? And create a cogwheel, boom, which is really cool. So this star modifier could have some, really interesting uses. Another one could be creating a triangle like this, right? And then you could just bevel this and boolean this and press Shift T to taper it. You're gonna get shape like this, which is pretty cool. Now, lastly, you got this option here, the factor. So watch this. If I switch it to 1, you're gonna get these kind of very irregular shapes. So the smallest one is, the lowest resolution is gonna be a hexagon, right? But if you're going to bump it to 0.1, you're gonna get some really crazy shapes like this, for example, which is really cool. And then you can obviously run a bevel on this, or a chamfer, right? And create stuff like that, which is pretty cool. Okay? So that's, in a nutshell, the circle cut. So let's go back to polygon, enemy Gucci. Now next one's gonna be the square cut or box cut, but the options are really the same. The only difference is that by default, the box cutter is going to draw the square or box cut from the corner, not from the middle, like for circle. And that's really it. It's just a regular cut. You just draw it and you're good to go. So, it's just a very simple operation. You click, you drag, and you're done, right? And then next one is gonna be Ngon. Now, Ngon is really cool. I really like Ngon. I work a lot with Ngons, and I love them. So by default, the way you work with this modifier is you click and drag to start the Ngon. then you release, and then you have to find a point. And you can see my angle is kind of snapping to angles. And if you hold control, you can release that angle. You can also release the angle here by unchecking this angle lock. And you can change the degree of angle that it snaps to by simply clicking on these. So let's say I'm going to snap every 5 degrees. Then I click, and then when I'm gonna go down, you'll see this kind of a white triangle and then a dot. It's gonna perfectly align with this, other side, which is really useful for creating precision cuts. And then space, and you cut. And obviously you can use all the other tools that are in the bottom here with this endgun cut, like bevel, solidify, etc. Now, there's an interesting option here called cyclic. If you turn this off, interesting stuff is gonna happen. So watch this. Now my endgun is gonna switch to a sort of like a solidified endgun. So you can press T to solidify this. You can press B to bevel this, right? Like that. There we go. It's a bit fiddly. And then we can simply cut the mesh like that, right? So this is a very interesting way of working, and you can do a lot with these handguns. And if you don't have any mesh, you will start building a shape, which is also cool. Let me just turn off this cyclic again. Kind of like this, right? You can, for example, build sci-fi walls. Just press B for bevel. And then click with the left mouse button, grab this one, extrude it, click again, and you get a wall. How cool is that? So that's the cyclic. And this one is basically a lasso. So if you're going to just, hold your mouse, click and hold and drag it, you're gonna just, design some sort of an organic cut, which I never use. And you obviously got some options here, for example, spacing and adaptive, which is going to adapt the number of verts on tight curves, and also the smoothness of the cut. So you can play with these settings here. But like I said, I never use this cut even once. And then the last one is going to be custom. Now, custom cuts are interesting. And you might actually find a lot of use cases for them. So let me show you how this works. So if you have nothing selected and you have no custom shapes in here, by default, you're going to be cutting with the Boxcutter logo like this, okay? That's a custom cutter. Now, what you can do, you can design a cutter. So for example, you can design a cutter using, Boolean cuts or whatever, right? And then let's use the extract tool, which is here, or you can press Y. So draw a cut here, make sure that it encompasses entire, this area. And then we're gonna go down, press Y for extraction and click. And this is going to extract this shape, see, to the custom cutter. So now I can use this cutter on other mesh. And if you hold control while you're drawing, it's going to snap to the perfect depth. And another thing you can do here, you can select the mesh for a cut. So let's say I have a cube here and I'm going to, run some, cut on this one like this, and we're gonna do something like that, and maybe, do something like this, okay, whatever, right? And I'm going to apply this with Control Sharpen. If I'm gonna go to Q menu and click Control Sharpen, look what happens to my booleans. They're gonna get applied. It's a dirty way of applying booleans, okay? We're gonna be talking about this tool and how to use it later on in the hard up section. So now we got this shape. So what I can do is I can actually snatch it. Go here, nuke this one, grab this selection tool, grab that shape. Now I have this shape selected as a cutter. And if I'm gonna grab a cube or whatever, I can actually cut with this shape. See what I mean, right? So there you go. Another thing you can do is you can actually select an object like this and use it as a cutter, but it's going to actually create a compounding cutter. So this cut's gonna be evolving, watch. One cut, now it has 2 cuts, now it has 3 cuts, now it has 4 cuts. All these cuts are being added and compounded onto that cut. So eventually you're gonna have an insane cut, like a crazy custom cutter that you can just, run once on a mesh, and it's gonna create some insane shape. So if I'm gonna grab a cube now, I can, run a cut like this on this cube and use this as a, kind of a greeble cut or something. So if, You want to play with it, it's kind of fun. Not very useful, but you know, kind of fun. So try it. Now let's just clean this up and let's go to this regular cutter. And what I want to show you is this collection option here. First of all, if you click here, you're going to see that you have two collections. Obviously, you got collection of objects and then you have collections of items. Let me actually clean this scene a bit. Let me just refresh this. And I'm going to have a cube and I'm going to have a one cutter. So we're going to have a collection of cutters, one cutter, and collection of our objects. In fact, let's run two cutters. One of them is going to be different with a bevel like this, okay? So we got two cutters. So now what I can do, I can use my regular cutter like this, right? But I can hold Alt and I can scroll between these custom cutters. You see that? One of them was straight and another one was with a bevel. So if you have multiple cuts in your collection, you can scroll through them using Alt. Another thing you can do, you can actually assign a collection to your cutters. So you can use objects in your scene as cutters. So if I'm gonna, you know, copy this cube and uniquify it, so go to operations uniquify, then I'm gonna move it here, right? Then I'm gonna apply all the cutters. So Q and Control click on sharpen, so it's a mesh. This cube 001 now is a shape, so I can use it as a cutter since I assigned this collection as my cutters. If I run the cutter now here and hold Alt, you see what happens? It pulls from this shape. So that's what you can do. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff you can do in order to customize your cutters with Boxcutter. Now let's talk about the Boolean types. You can see that if you're going to be switching between them, you will see some options here on the bottom, and I think we need to talk about these, okay? So the first one, cut mode, is simple. There are no additional options. You simply cut and you're done. So again, you draw, you cut, and you approve, and that's it, right? Next one is going to be slice. So you got two options here, okay? First one is a recut. Now recut is an interesting option, but you can also enable it with shortcut key. Let me show you what this recut option actually does. So we're going to slash this mesh with cut and gone like this, right? And I'm going to simply cut it off. So this n-gon here, I can recover it by going to Q and ever scroll, right? So now let's say I wanted to cut this mesh here, this one, so the main mesh, using a slice boolean, right? So I'm going to slice this mesh here with a box, okay, like this. But I wanted to recover with the same cutter this part that was cut off. So what I can do, while I'm drawing the slice, I can press Alt-X like this, Alt-X. So this is going to be recutting the boolean that was cut off, which is a really interesting option. If you're going to enable this option, it's going to do it by default like that, right? So it's better to have it on a shortcut, especially that it's going to turn itself off after the first cut. So simply remember it's Alt-X, right? So you draw it, Alt-X, and that's a recut. Now this one is going to apply the slice after slicing the mesh. So you run a slice and it's going to apply it, which means it's going to become a geometry. So this slice is going to become a geometry. You don't really want that because you want to have the ability to actually modify your cuts, right? Move them around, etc., or change the shape. Now this one is an intersect. There's nothing really special here. You simply cut and there's an intersection between the shapes, and that's all that is to it, right? Next boolean is gonna be inset boolean. So here, this one, select the cube and let me show you how it works. It's basically a cut where you can press T to solidify your mesh like this inside of it. And when you apply this cutter, unlike a solidification with a regular cut, so unlike this, right? You see, this one is floating inside of the mesh, whereas this one is a part of the mesh when you apply it, okay? So it's going to be a part of the mesh, right? You see that? So it's a different type of cut. And this is an absolute bugger to perform with Vanilla Blender. So you got different options here. One of them is going to be recut, which you could use really. So let's go to n-gon and slice this top here off, right? And then we're going to go to D menu and grab the inset. And We can actually enable recut here or just press Alt X, it's the same thing. So when you're going to be running this cut now, like this, and press T for solidification, you see that the recut is going to perform a very different cut indeed. And it's kind of difficult to predict what's going to happen, to be honest. I rarely use this cut, so recut with the insert, because it's a bit unpredictable. Now slice, on the other hand, let's just grab a clean cube and I'm going to show you again. So here, run that and you see that's a regular cut. But if you go into enable slice, right, you're going to get something like this. And let's click that. And then you're going to go to local view and you're going to get this panel, you see? So you're going to get this panel on top of the mesh. So let me just sharpen this and move it here. And you see that's what you're going to get. So it's different than slice, because when you run the regular slice, right, it's going to slice the whole mesh, right? So the whole bit. This one is slicing only the outer part of the solidification, if you know what I mean, right? So the part that was solidified, this one, right, remains the part of the main mesh. So you can create kind of panels with this cut, right? Now the last option, which is bevel, which is kind of interesting. What you can do, you can create wedge cuts with this cut, which is kind of, you know, kind of weird. But you know, you can do the same thing with a wedge cut, which means you can grab a regular slice, you can run a cut, then press W and Control, and you get the same thing. So you know, it's just, you know, it's just a gimmick, okay? But you know, you can use it if you want to. Now let's talk about the next cutter, which is gonna be join. Now this one could cause a little bit of problems, especially when you're going to be running it in default settings, which you should, but that's just a Blender limitation. So if you're going to run a Boolean cut here, you'll see that this cut's going to be flush with the surface of the cube. And everything looks peachy until you're going to run a bevel, right? So there's a bit of a boo-boo in here. I need to fix that. So let me just go here to operations with hard ops. And in fact, let's apply this. So Alt click on Ever Scroll, which is going to apply the modifiers. And if you go to edit mode, you'll see that we're going to have a few problems, right? So what we can do is go to Q menu and then operations and clean mesh, but we're still not there yet. So then go to edit mode, dissolve this edge, and then you're good to go. So there's a few things you need to clean up when you're going to be running flush booleans like this. If I were you, what I would suggest doing is something like this. Run a boolean close to the surface like that. Press E to extrude it. Apply this, right? Then, you know, apply the boolean. So Alt click on Ever Scroll. And then simply cut it, you know. So grab a regular cutter and simply slice it like this. It's going to be much cleaner. So you got options, but you know, this is what I would do. And if you Control click on sharpen, you have no problems with the mesh. You know, you can run the bevel here and everything going to be peachy. So, you know, join booleans are kind of tricky in Blender, okay? Now, this option here will turn off this exact feature. So if you're going to run a boolean one more time, right, it's going to be a little bit underneath this surface, you see? So that's what's going to do. And you can turn this on and off here as well. It's the same function, all right? Now this one, I have no clue what it does. Okay, only cats know. So ask Master Zion. Now knife tool is really easy. So cut through, what it means is simply gonna cut through the mesh. So if you're gonna cut through, it's gonna cut through, right? If you're gonna turn this off, so let's go to D menu. And if you're gonna cut from the orthographic view, you will see that it will not cut through, right? So that's simple. And then you have this hops mark. Now, hops mark refers to the hard ops marking edges with certain attributes that you specify in Control tilde menu. So if you go here to sharpening, you see these attributes gonna be applied to the cut when you use a knife with this on. So if I turn it on, which I wouldn't, I'm going to apply all these attributes to these edges. So it's going to be kind of like running sharpen on all the edges, but simply it's going to be applied only to this cut here, to the knife cut, yeah? Now this could be useful, for example, when you're going to be running stuff like, let's say, seams. So let's press OK, right? So you're going to have a seam. So let me just grab a new cube. So if I'm going to run sharpen, so Q and sharpen, I'm going to get seams on all these edges, right? So let's say I was running a knife, let's say with the end gone, and I'm gonna be applying a hops mark, which means seam in our case, to all these edges, it should work. So let's see, there you go, and the seam's gonna be applied. So when you're gonna be, you know, creating maybe UVs, and you need some custom UVs, this may be useful. Or for example, bevel weight, to run bevels with limitation method set to weight. So anyway, that's what this tool does, right? So let me revert it to the default, grab a new cube, let's keep going. Next one is gonna be this one. So surface extract. Now obviously you wanna keep that on because you know, this tool, when you're going to have some kind of a custom cut here, whatever, and you wanna extract it, right? You want this to extract the surface, right? Like this. So the surface of the cut. So when you repeat that, you're gonna have adjust the cut. So I would keep this on default, you know, that's fine. And this one, the last one, make, you can hide gray shape. So what it will do when you draw the shape, you will not see the shape, you're gonna see just the cutter, you see. If I turn it off, right, it's gonna actually show the shape, you see. So it's just up to you how you wanna set it up. I prefer this, you know, set to default, and I'm happy with that. So that's all you need to know about these, you know, cutters here and settings. To be honest, I never change anything under these cutters. There was not a single time I actually went in and changed something. If I want some specific tool, like for example recut, I know I have to press Alt X, and you know, that's all I need, and I'm good to go. So anyway, that should cover all these different types of booleans here under settings. So anyway, that's it. And I think in next video, we're gonna, you know, start talking about the rest of these options here. So I'm guessing maybe 2 videos is gonna be enough for this menu. And then we can move on to other things in Boxcutter. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.